Okay, I'm talking to Peter Frampton. This is Mike Gerstein. And Peter, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, I'm Peter Frampton. I'm Executive Director with an organization called the Learning Enrichment Foundation. And we're located in part of the city of Toronto that used to be known as the City of York. Eglinton and Keele at the foot of the 400, if you're aware of the city and know the city. This community is actually the second poorest riding in the province of Ontario, the poorest being Kenora, I believe, to the far north. And it's been a second poorest riding for about 40 years, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that it was the industrial heartland of the city, and it's where there was a more affordable housing, and so it's been a reception area for new immigrants for many years. So people come, they settle, they become established, they move out, and a new group comes in. When we're speaking then of the digital divide and those who are excluded from technology in our community, English as a barrier is something that it comes up and of course is quite necessary, especially when communicating with or trying to communicate with government and other services. So literacy and English are certainly a bit of a barrier that we see, and people overcome that barrier over time by taking language classes and whatnot. The other concern that we're seeing is just the precariousness of work and the affordability of the internet. So many of the people that we work with find employment, but they're finding a series of part-time jobs or a series of non-permanent jobs. So through a placement agency, they're finding 3 or 4 weeks of work, and then there'll be a week or two blank, and then they have to find some more work in between. And when one's income is below 30,000, and I would encourage any of your students to actually just do a budget at 25,000 or something, and see what they can afford and what they can't afford. Because what you find is your housing is a fixed cost, and your transportation is a fixed cost, and there's very little left over from that. People's telecommunications costs are a fixed cost as well, but their focus there tends to be, and this is personal choice, but it's an interesting dynamic. People will, if they have telephone, cable, and internet, the first thing they will cancel is their internet connection. The second thing they will cancel is their telephone, and they hold on to their cable. And that may sound illogical, but when you're stuck in poverty, that's perhaps how you keep your sanity. And what one always finds in working with people who are making ends meet in a tough way is that they're usually very good at it and very smart about it. And so access to the internet, as we move forward into a dynamic where you have more of the disposable worker as a as a means of engaging people in work, I think we're looking at less access as time goes on, quite simply because of its affordability. Clients are afraid of using it too much, and they're afraid of the downloads, and they're afraid of those charges, and so they're cautious about what they purchase and how they move forward. So the access is really just plain and simple affordability and a matter of making priorities and a matter of personal budget. And I think, unfortunately, in a time when having access is more and more important. More and more advocacy is being done online, and that's relevant for the clients that we're serving. More and more government services going online, which is certainly relevant to the clients that we're serving, and of course more and more job applications online. So it's a bizarre and complicated dynamic. We're seeing stronger uptake, but I would venture to guess that as we move forward and we see the impacts of precarious work and the change in the job market moving forward, we'll actually see a narrowing and a deepening of the digital divide.
Interesting. Because the government, as you know, is saying that basically the mission accomplished and let's go on to something else. What sort of services do you offer to your clients in this area, Peter?
So we have, as most, sort of free computer labs. LES is sort of an interesting story. Many years ago, 15 or so, we were actually the first charity to have a business partnership with Microsoft. And as a Microsoft solution provider, we started training people with their Microsoft system engineer. Microsoft came to us and said, what's going on? Your success rate for certification is 4 times any of our corporate partners. And we laughed and said it had nothing to do with us, introduced them to our clients. At that time, we were training individuals who'd been on social assistance for 5 years. So you go back 15 years. You've been on assistance for 5 years, and now you have a chance to land a job at $40,000 a year. And we had 90% placement before the class ended, because there was such a balloon in the demand for people in that field. So the bottom line was clients weren't going to give it up. That's changed over time and became harder to get a job as an MCSE without the experience, and so we launched as a community internet provider. Grew that to 1,500 accounts and had our students manage the system so that they could get the experience they needed. And then eventually we dropped the partnership with Microsoft, and eventually dropped teaching Microsoft Office. So what's interesting is with this digital divide, we found that people know how to use the technology, it's the access to it. So people can hunt and peck their way through MS Word and pound out their resume. We don't have to teach MS Word anymore, unless someone really wanted to go into a sort of receptionist type position. But even those are few and far between. I haven't had a personal assistant for over 5 years. So one does one's own writing and one's own thing moving forward. So right now the supports really are mostly around access and mentoring. So we have wireless throughout our 73,000 square foot facility. We have computers that are scattered through our town square and in our front reception area that people are just welcome to use. And then, you know, we'll ramp things up to run tax clinics and whatnot that require, obviously, that connection for filing to the internet and whatnot. So it really is at the access level. We've been able to support some community partners in putting wireless access together for people living in rooming houses in the center of the city, in the southeastern core of sort of downtown. And that's been fascinating. These rooming houses, it's part of Toronto Community Housing, and for any of your students who don't know, Toronto Community Housing is the largest landlord in North America, with 54,000 units housing about 250,000 people. So that's housing the entire city of Regina. In this downtown core, there's 54 homes that have been turned into rooming homes, and mostly men, mostly over the age of 50, and mostly having come from the street to a shelter, and this being sort of their next step in home. When we started with them 10 years ago, their goal around community access was that everybody would have a computer. And what we found in the last number of years is it's not difficult to get everybody a computer. The technology's become so cheap that even for gentlemen that are living on $600, $700 a month, we can get them the computer easily enough. They can maintain it themselves and learn how to maintain it through mentorships and networks and community support. But it's that damned access to the internet. So we took a number of internet connections and through a wireless mesh have started to share those in the community and throughout those buildings. And the take-up on that, within a week of launching it with no advertising, there were over 300 users. And so I would argue with the government of the day that what we found is that people do have the phones and they do have the tools to access the internet, but the bandwidth is still expensive, and so this bump in usage that we've seen is for us proof that they have the tools and the computers and a lot of handheld absolutely. But if the bandwidth is expensive and encumbered with hidden costs in terms of overusing, then people are nervous about it. And so their vision down in Cabbagetown is to create a wireless mesh over the entire community.
Wow. Well, thank you very much, Peter. It's been great. Thanks.
A few stories from the heart of Toronto. So thank you, Mike. A pleasure to be able to share them.